Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with the R2D2 hoodie because it is time for a Christmas-related episode. This time, the Christmas Truce. We are returning to it after almost a year, just slightly a couple weeks before 1 year since we watched part 1. But this time, World War I Christmas Truce, Letters from the Trench, Extra History number 2. Before we dive into the video, though, make sure you check out the links in my description box or in my pinned comment in the comment section. Got a link to my gaming channel here on YouTube and a link to my Twitch channel. Would love it if you threw me a follow and hung out in the chat. Now, let's go ahead and dive into number 2 of the Christmas Truce.
This was a letter to a German newspaper in December of 1914. Yesterday there was a fierce and terrible onslaught of Christmas packages into our trenches.
What?
No man was spared. In the confusion, one soldier suffered a salami impaled straight into his stomach. Another had raisins from an exploding pastry fly directly into his eyes. A third had the misfortune of having a bottle of cognac fly into his mouth.
Yeah. Did they really throw presents at each other? Or give each other presents?
This little holiday special is brought to you by World of Tanks. Use the invite code ARMISTICE if you're a new player who wants to check out the game. World War I was a letter-writing war, one where pencil and paper were a soldier's line of communication with friends and family.
Oh yeah, we learned, letters were so, I guess the word would be intrinsic to really the World War I kind of experience for the soldier, that it carries over still into the modern day, that when you are talking about World War I had an assignment where we had to pretend to be this was back in high school. This was in, I think, my sophomore year. Maybe it was my freshman year. But anyways, we were in World War I, and my teacher had us write letters to home as if we were a World War I soldier. Because letters were that important to soldiers of World War I. Yeah.
And reading those letters provides some insight into what life was like in those trenches. So today, let's read some excerpts.
And really, because of those letters, yeah, we do get pretty good understanding of how shit trenches were.
From those soldiers' holidays.
And I think that might also partially play a part into the mindset following World War I. Of course, you have the sheer amount of death that happened in World War I that turned people away from, wanting to experience another world war. However, I think because of the sheer experience that soldiers had and that they wrote about being in the trenches, is that perhaps even world leaders feared that if another world war were to start and they were to fight it like they'd fought World War I, they would just have soldiers mutiny against them because they did not want to experience what their fathers or grandfathers or whatever had experienced in the First World War. Now, this is, of course, just a random tangent that I'm going on and has probably no basis, but I'm just guessing.
Holiday letters.
I'm having
fun.
fun.
Of course, none of us at Extra Credits have ever experienced being deployed over the holidays. So real quick, I want to hand the mic over to somebody who has. Here is Wargaming's military specialist, Richard Cutland, back again to give us a little insight.
In my 30 years of service, I was extremely fortunate to only spend around 6 Christmases away from home and family.
He sounds like someone that, kind of a bit like Captain Price from Call of Duty. He kind of sounds a bit like him. If I'm remembering the voice right. Kind of sounds like at least one of those Modern Warfare characters from the campaign.
The first was spent lying in a muddy ditch in Northern Ireland, where we'd been ordered to set up an observation post to watch the comings and goings of a known IRA terrorist. Cold, wet, hungry and tired, watching someone else celebrate Christmas with family and friends. It was certainly a low point for us all. As a young soldier, the easiest thing to do was not think about it. It was merely another day amongst a multitude of other days. The real heartbreak occurred after marriage and children. It was wrenching to explain why Daddy would not be there on such a special day. Tales of helping Santa at the North Pole or having to feed the reindeer quickly wore thin as my children grew older and wiser. A soldier's wife has much to contend with, and my own wife's angst and worry during any operational tour was compounded when I was away for the holidays. The armies always tried their best if circumstances allowed. If you were near a headquarters, the chefs would knock up a Christmas dinner with all the trimmings. Well, perhaps not all, but they did their best with what was available. Unfortunately, sitting with 100 men wearing paper hats was not quite the same as Christmas dinner with your family. Yet we were
Yeah.
all aware it's necessary to spend such periods away. And let's face it, it was part of the job. But it was always a killer to be told that a deployment was imminent and Christmas would be cancelled. So to all those servicemen and women who find themselves away for this very special time, I salute you and wish you and your families peace and happiness.
Thank you, Richard. Now let's set the scene. It's Boxing Day 1914, and Private Henry Williamson is writing home about the most extraordinary Christmas of his life. I'm writing from the trenches. In my mouth is a pipe presented by the Princess Mary. In the pipe is tobacco. Well, of course, you say. But wait. In the pipe is German tobacco from a German soldier.
No way.
Yes, a live German soldier from his own trench. On Christmas Eve, both armies sang carols and cheered, and there was very little firing. The Germans called to our men to come and fetch a cigar, and our men told them to come to us. This went on for some time until a bold Tommy crept out and stood between the trenches, and a Saxon came to meet him. They shook hands and laughed. Thus the ice was broken. Our men are speaking to them now. German Corporal Joseph Wenzel was similarly amazed at the gathering, writing, "What I believed to be madness several hours ago, I could see now with my own eyes. Bavarians and English, until then the greatest of enemies, shook hands, talked, and exchanged items. A single star stood still in the sky directly above them, interpreted by many as a special sign from heaven. More and more joy."
I wonder how this communication worked, because you know, in our modern day, of course, you know, far more Europeans speak English, right? Than I'd say English people speak the other European languages, right? But back then, you know, a German would probably really only know German. An Englishman would definitely really only know English. And a Frenchman would probably mostly only know French. So I really wonder how this communication worked. If, like, maybe I'm wrong and actually people back then knew, you know, even the common folk here, knew, you know, German as well as English, or knew French as well as German, or whatever.
joined, and the entire line greeted each other. For the rest of my life, I shall never forget this scene, which goes to show that human feelings continue to go on, even if, in these times, men do not know anything but killing and murdering. But not everybody held fire. British rifleman John Erskine's unit was fraternizing in no man's land when a soldier, disobeying his officer's order, shot one of the Germans. He writes, "The Germans immediately replied, and instead of firing on where the shot came from, they fired at the first person they saw. Unfortunately, this happens to be one of our corporals, who was shot through the head. A most regrettable fact connected with the affair was that he has 3 brothers in the battalion, and it must have had a disheartening effect on them. The Germans apologized, but it left a black mark on the day. Still, in many places, the peace held, until the generals ended it with artillery." The spirit of the Christmas truce would be rekindled the following year, albeit on a small scale. In December of 1915, French soldier Louis Barthas found himself in a spontaneous ceasefire when heavy rain forced both sides to abandon their trenches. He wrote, "Frenchmen and Germans looked at each other and saw that they were all men, no different from one another. They smiled, exchanged comments. Hands reached out and grasped. We shared tobacco, a canteen of coffee, or Pinard. One day, a huge devil of a German stood up on a mound and gave a speech, which only the Germans could understand word for word, but everyone knew what it meant because he smashed his rifle on a tree stump, breaking it in 2. Applause broke out on both sides. Meanwhile, our big shot leaders were in a furor.
Yeah, this fraternization really ruins the war effort because, you know, once people get to know each other and connect as people, they no longer want to fight each other.
What in the Lord's name would happen if the soldiers refused to kill each other? German soldier Hermann Bauer, also present, was thinking much the same. He wrote, "The infantry does not shoot anymore, just the crazy artillery. The masters make war, they have a quarrel, and the workers, the little men, have to stand there fighting against each other. Is that not a great stupidity?" Once again, senior officers broke the truce with artillery and court-martial.
And this is a complete tangent. However, it really proves this moment, this Christmas truce really proves Karl Marx's theory on the interconnection between people right? One of his driving points is that you are not as a as an American, since the majority of my audience is American. I'm going to use that. But of course, this applies to everyone. I'm just going to use the word American. As a, say you are a lower class American, um, Karl Marx's theory is that you have a closer tie to a lower class Mexican, lower class Canadian, lower class anyone from any other country in the world than you do with the upper class of your own country. That is one of the I would say probably biggest points in Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. Well, and Friedrich Engels, because they wrote it together, right? And really, when you look at history, and you see moments like this, you're like, he's right.
Threats. The fighting began again, and Barthas would spend 3 more Christmases at war. The same was true for many others. In fact, Christmas of 1916 brought Canadian infantryman John McLean his first taste of combat. He wrote, "Dear Mother, I haven't written for over a week now, but I couldn't very well. We went into the trenches on Christmas Eve and were in for 6 days. It was not too bad at all, far better than I expected. All our fellows came out fine, except Jack Ivner, who got a machine gun bullet through the leg. The noise was awful, but a person will get used to that after a while. I spent Christmas Day in a dugout. If I live to be 300 years old, I will never forget this Christmas week. One night, I was going up a trench, and I saw a big gray cat sitting on the parapet.
Oh.
I'd like to tell you more, but I can do that when I get home. Now you are doing too much worrying. We are all right if a man is careful." A month later, he was dead.
Oh.
Meanwhile, another Canadian, Jack Davy, was having a bittersweet Christmas. He had come home after months in a POW camp, only to find himself at a military hospital in Toronto, thousands of miles from his new fiancée. He wrote to her on Boxing Day, "Darling Kitty, many thanks for the letter and the card with Christmas wishes. We had quite a snowstorm on Christmas Eve. It's quite a novelty to see a real white Christmas. Yesterday was a lovely day. On the whole, I had a good time, but I hope next year won't be such a disappointment for us, sweetheart. Surely this rotten luck of being separated at Christmas can't go on forever. 1 week has passed since I was measured for my leg. I wish that I could have it by the new year so I could start the year on both feet again. It will soon be 2 years since I walked like a human being. It seems a long time to talk about it, but
God
I can
damn.
picture those fields and imagine I can see the exact spot where I fell, as though it only happened yesterday. I guess it'll be a long day before I forget it. But I hope that all the dark days are behind us now, sweetheart. We just have to be happy and live long to make up for it all." As the war ended and the veterans
Did Jack Davy live? He live?
trickled home,
Tell me.
that is exactly what they tried to do. Yet their holidays spent in the shadow of dugouts would never fully leave them. There are so many letters like these. Honestly, deciding which ones to include was the hardest part. But if this happened to capture your imagination, try something later. If you go home for the holidays, or if you happen to already be there, ask your relatives if they have any old letters lying around. It's possible that the next story from the trenches might
don't.
come from your
I
own
don't.
family. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you next year.
That was World War I. Christmas Truce Letters from the Trenches. Extra History number 2. I've got nothing to add here at the end. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you next. Peace.